Hey there, this is Michelle from the Jane team. We are so excited to join you today for the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you haven't had the chance to meet Jane just yet, allow me to introduce you. Jane is an all-in-one practice management software designed to be helpful to you, no matter how or where you practice. With Jane, you can book, schedule, chart, process payments, and run your entire practice online. Come get to know us over at jane.app/physical therapy. If you know you're ready to get started, you can use the code ICEPT1MO for a 1-month grace period. We'll talk to you soon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of a team of faculty within the Modern Management of the Older Adult Geriatrics curriculum. We teach 3 online courses in our geriatric space. We have our 8-week online course, Essential Foundations. We are almost approaching halfway full for our next cohort, that starts in March, beginning of March. And we teach our 8-week online advanced concepts course, which starts in May. And then we are hitting the road. We're in Des Moines, Iowa this weekend for what I believe is an almost sold out course. And then we are really hitting the ground running when it comes to our live and our contracted courses for MMOA Live in 2022. We are actually booking into 2023. I'm going to apologize for getting on here a little bit early today. Usually I try to be right on the nose with 9 o'clock. I am presenting at research rounds for McMaster University for my PhD. And I got my lines mixed up and all crossed, and I am with mom brain, so I thought it was at 9:30, whole thing, but we are here right now, and we are going to be talking about nutrition with older adults. So with nutrition, we are oftentimes really conflicted as PTs because we know that it's so important, but we don't want to step on toes. We want to make sure we're respecting our scope of practice. We may not be up to date with some of the literature in this area. And so I wanted to tackle this topic from a very 10,000 foot view, and kind of talk about different things that are within our scope of practice and kind of thoughts and research around nutrition for the older adult. So the first thing is to apply this in context, right? So for older adults, we tend to have a high level of protein insufficiency in older adults. The recommended daily allotment baseline for older adult, or sorry, for a younger adult is 0.8 grams per kilo per day. So that is approximately half a pound per pound of body weight. I guess a little bit less than that, like 0.4, 0.3. For older adults, they're recommending that gets boosted. So up into 1.2 grams per kilo per day. And a lot of our older adults are getting nowhere near that. So we see a high level of malnutrition, especially when we get into more institutionalized settings. When we get older adults who have more sickness, they tend to maybe have a little bit less drive. We know from an aging physiology perspective that drive for hunger, drive for thirst tends to decline with age. And compound that with, not feeling that great or having that fatigue or malaise or having different issues with physical function. And then we can get this unfortunate spiraling effect that can happen when it comes to nutrition. When we think about our role as physical therapists, I think it's really important, and if you've been following ICE at all, you know that we're really on board with this, is that the health promotion piece of our practice has to be very forward facing and very prevalent. This includes nutrition. We can't talk about being fitness forward and focusing on our recovery if we're not speaking to nutrition, at least at a very cursory level, and potentially making our appropriate referral. So when we're thinking about health promotion, we're thinking, being physically active, avoiding sedentary behavior, managing stress, encouraging good social interactions, making sure we're getting appropriate sleep, and making sure that we're eating high quality food. From an older adult perspective, the big one is going to be protein. So let's kind of talk about where our scope of practice lies. We know that as physical therapists, we have within our scope of practice the skills to be able to speak and educate on nutrition. I am not saying that as a physical therapist, I am creating meal plans for my older adults. What I am saying is that I ask about protein intake in particular, nutrition as a whole, but protein intake in particular, with every single one of my older adult clients. And oftentimes, what comes back at me is that a lot of my older adults don't really know how much protein they're taking in, how much they need, and they've just never had these conversations before, unless maybe they're in like a diabetes management program or something. So, with that being said, from there, I'll say, well, do you know how much protein you're getting in a day? Or take me through a standard day in your nutrition. Like what does your day look like from an eating perspective? And without fail, a lot of times what I see is that there's either a big delay in having breakfast, which we can talk about intermittent fasting at another episode. But delayed in breakfast, coffee, hopefully water, and then a high carbohydrate breakfast. Right, a lot of my clients are having toast or fruit or things like that. Sometimes eggs, which has kind of equal fats to proteins. So they're getting maybe 7 to 10 grams of protein. Then at lunch, they're maybe grazing and they have their main protein at dinner. When we think about gross amount of calories, sometimes it can be too little, and definitely too little when it comes to portion sizes for an appropriate amount of protein. Because when it says about protein intake, we want to make sure that we're getting our recommended daily amount, but also in order to drive changes in musculoskeletal health and strengthening, we want to make sure that we have sufficient amounts of protein. And there's some preliminary evidence in older adults that having at least one bolus or one meal that has at least 35 grams of protein in one consumption can be effective for helping drive change. Because what we're seeing in the literature and why this is so important, not just for promoting the health of our older adults, but it is also influencing our outcomes, right? So I posted a study yesterday that was looking at one-to-one in-person face-to-face advice. The pandemic kind of ruined the end of their study, but around getting the right amount of protein, how to consume protein. They started helping with figuring out high protein foods. And then they tracked body metrics and physical performance over time. And so what they saw was physical activity stayed constant. So whatever they were doing before, the study, the individuals, the researchers doing the study just encouraged them to keep going. And what they saw was improvements in physical outcomes. So they saw an improvement in the ability or time to walk 400 meters, which is a marker of mobility disability. They saw improvements in gait speed, and they saw some improvements in lower extremity strength. And that's important, right? So everything else being constant, they were not doing anything different. They saw improvements in physical function. So it could be a barrier to the success of our interventions if we are not giving our older adults, or they are not giving themselves, the nutritional environment to drive some of these changes that we are trying to implement in our interventions. So if our older adults don't have a sufficient amount of protein to recover from exercise, then we may see further kind of spiraling into that deconditioning related to arthritis, for example. So many different ways that we can be thinking about this when it comes to working with our older adults. However, it's great for us to be having these conversations. In the health promotion space, we know that the more clinicians that are having this conversation, this is not like, this is my scope versus this is your scope. This is all of our scope, because this relates to behavior change, and behavior change is hard, especially sometimes for our older adults who may not have some of the resources that make these changes easy to make. So this is not like, this is their scope, this is our scope. This is everybody's scope who's working in healthcare to make our population more healthy. However, there are significant barriers and things that we need to be thinking about as we kind of tackle this nutrition conversation. So the first thing is, let's kind of talk about different barriers that older adults may be experiencing. Number one is financial barriers. So we cannot think that all of our older adults are in a financial position that eating high quality or organic, nutritious food is going to be realistic. Food is not getting cheaper. My grocery bill will speak to that. And so it can be really tough for some of our older adults. They can say, I want to be able to eat healthily, but it's just not available. Some in Canada, there's some northern communities where, getting pop or soda is 99 cents and getting a gallon of milk is $10. So in terms of, what people are purchasing based on the limited amount of money that they have, it might be going one way versus the other. So there's some financial barriers there. So we can start trying to help remove some of those barriers by looking at cost-effective protein options, canned beans, milk can be a good option if it's relatively inexpensive. Sometimes protein powders are if you get 20 grams of protein for about $1 a scoop, that actually might be a pretty cost-effective option for increasing the amount of protein in a person's meal if they can pay for the jug up front. Removing that financial barrier or talking through that financial barrier to maybe reprioritize some of the more protein-rich foods in a person's diet from their grocery bill can be a way for us to be removing some of those barriers for our older adults. Another barrier that our older adults might be experiencing is cognitive barriers. So if we are having an older adult who has a significant amount of cognitive impairment, those routines we know can be extremely helpful for helping them manage their day. And so if that is the case, then we want to be thinking about how we could potentially remove some of those barriers. Bailey, come here. Sorry, come here. My dog might be barking in a second. I'm going to apologize for that in advance. Can be helpful with that, right? Some of our social barriers, can they get out to get more food? That's going to be a really important part of this. So all of these things can be extremely important, and some of the conversations that us and OT and all of our allied health professionals are going to be having. The final thing, Bailey, come here. Come here. Sorry, I knew that was going to happen. So one of the final things that we might be thinking about when it comes to our older adults is the capacity for us to make that referral. So we have a client who is struggling with a lot of different multimorbidities. Making a meal plan or making specific recommendations is not going to be a good option. And so, for example, individuals with chronic kidney disease having too much roughage or greens, which we would think would be a healthy option, may actually be something that's fairly detrimental for them. So things that we need to be thinking about with respect to, where our scope of practice ends and where to make that referral to registered dietitians within the community is going to be extremely important. So when it comes to our scope, kind of bringing this full circle, we know that we have evidence to support the use of protein supplementation to augment some of our interventions. It may actually make our interventions more effective. In terms of the research evidence, we have evidence to support supplementation with protein, creatine, omega-3s, vitamin D, and calcium. Other supplements, not so much. When it comes to making specific recommendations, we're probably going to go to our RD colleagues, especially if they're available to us. And then finally, we're going to start looking at different barriers as well. Are there financial barriers? Are there cognitive barriers? Are there the need for education? Because all these things are going to be extremely important because behavior change is hard. We want to make sure that we are setting our clients up for the most amount of success. And this is not I'm stepping on somebody else's toes because, just like I said, behavior change is hard. And the more clinicians who are speaking the same language, advocating for these healthy lifestyle factors, that health promotion piece, the better. All right, I apologize for the dog barking. Amazon came to my front door as we were talking. If it rains, it pours, and I'm late. Oh my goodness, I am in full-blown mom mode today, where my mom brain is just firing on all cylinders, not firing well. So I hope you all enjoyed that. Let me know if you talk about nutrition. I did a poll and I saw that quite a few of you are actually at least talking about protein. So I think that's wonderful. This is more conversations that we're starting to see, especially with our older adults, because it can really impact the trajectory and physical function, especially when augmented with PT intervention. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday and we will talk soon, hopefully without the dogs barking. Oh, sorry. Bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.